Hey, everybody, welcome to another episode of Escape Velocity. Today I am joined by Traci Barrett. Tracy runs Navigate the Journey and has also written a wonderful book, which we can talk about as well. Um, and also has a really interesting background from being one of the founding team that started HGTV to which I think is really interesting, also having a MA in professional psychology. So just a really interesting background. She has navigated her own journey very thoughtfully, and I think has taken a lot of those lessons and put them into the book. What if there's more? Finding significance beyond success. And, there's a lot to talk about. I also will say I worked with Tracy in the past and had a great experience. So, all that, welcome. Thank you for joining me. Glad you're
Oh,
here.
I'm so glad to be here too. This is great.
Um, so many questions. I mean, from your perspective of going through your own journey and then kind of using that process to reflect on how you wanted to work with other people. Um, where did that start? Was it going through the HGTV experience that just kind of made you realize that these things are not just sort of set it and you're just on the road and you don't have to worry about anything anymore and your career is off and roaring? Were there any aha moments early on that have led you in this direction?
Oh, yeah, that's a great question. I think for me, when you're part of a startup, you're not sure if it's going to be successful or not successful. It's a big risk, but there's a ton of reward. And I was just lucky enough to kind of fall into a great startup. And when great startups take off, you are given a lot of responsibility, probably even before you should have it. So I became a leader at a media company at a really young age. I mean, I was promoted to be a vice president at 29, and I was overseeing people and doing things and making decisions that probably I had no good right doing. But that's what happens when you're on a roller coaster and it's taking off. And I think one of the things I realized, and many people realize this in their career, is there's not a lot of training to be a leader. There's not, there's books out there. And, I'm talking way back in the mid 1990s when I was in corporate America. There wasn't a lot of like management training or leadership training, and definitely not at HGTV because we didn't even have an HR department when we started. It was just, a handful of us. So
Right.
I think that struggle of trying to figure out like who am I as a leader, how am I supposed to do this, how do you best meet people where they are, what do people really want, what do they need, how do you motivate, all of those questions swirling around, I think is what kind of started me on this journey of wanting to understand more, wanting to like get a degree in psychology, wanting to be a good leader. And that has just taken me across the last 30 years of my career.
Well, let me ask you this. I always share this with my teams. I remind them that nobody's going to show up and give them the certificate that says they're an expert now.
Mhm.
Um, there also is no sort of like judgmental overseeing entity that is going to swoop in and say, "Oh no, you haven't earned the right to say that. You don't have any business being here." It's not imposter syndrome. It's more just that I think people wait to lean into leadership um, because they feel like they don't have the credentials or the authority or whatever it might be. How did obviously there wasn't a lot of guidance around this, but how did you give yourself permission?
Well, I don't know if I ever thought about whether I have permission to do this or not. I think
Mhm,
that I had a lot of drive and
mhm.
I wanted to, you know, make a difference, make something happen in my life and other people's lives. And I think I realized that that whole concept of on the job training It's very much, what kind of happens more in the trades, and we don't really talk about it as much in a corporate business environment, is
Mhm.
this: you're going to learn as you go. It's okay to not know everything. And even
Yeah,
more, you're never going to know everything. And you're right, there's no certificate, there's no, you know, roadmap of like what the perfect thing is going to look like, because we're talking about human beings,
yeah,
and it's a messy environment always that people have to learn to navigate. And I think there's a difference between being competent and whatever your craft is and whatever your job is. And then also, understanding human nature and forming relationships and, understanding even who you are as a human being and how best to show up and impact people's lives. And I think early on, I realized, confidence is a buildable skill. And I think that's really important for people, leaders to understand is you have to work on your confidence. You have to build that through, self-awareness and through clarity and seeking it out. And
yeah,
instead, what I find with a lot of leaders I coach is they think everybody else was just like born with the confidence, or they're born to be leaders, or they've got it all figured out. But I've coached all sorts of people in all sorts of size companies and worked with all sorts of size companies. And I realize, like, on the outside, people can look and act successful, but everybody's struggling with something internally.
sure. Along those lines, what are some of the common struggles that you see with leaders in leadership teams, um, that you're either sort of like, oh, there it is again, or you're surprised by?
I don't think I'm surprised anymore by anything. think I think at this point, I feel like, I spent 20 years in corporate America, over 10 years with Navigate the Journey, and it has been such a ride going into different teams and seeing all the different personalities and realizing that everybody is sort of struggling with the same things. Teams
Mhm,
are struggling with the same things, leaders are struggling with the same things, but it's the people that are most open and honest and are operating by a set of core values. Those are the teams that are really excelling. The ones that are like, we're going to figure this out. We're going to have a vision. We're going to have a plan. And and we're going to make sure that everybody on the team has a voice,
yeah.
and we're going to all row in the same direction. And that takes a lot of work, but there's an intentionality to it, and there's a decision that has been made as a team, as this is the way we're going to be. And if we need to seek outside help for that, or we need to read a book together, or we need to challenge each other, the teams that are really focused on being not just profitable but also healthy
Mhm.
are the teams that, I want to place a bet on.
Yeah. Um, I mean, that makes sense, and, just the name of your company, Navigate the Journey, it's interesting. I mean, I've navigated some twists and turns, as have you.
Mhm. Mhm.
Um, and there do there do come, points where you don't have the map.
Right.
You don't know which way to go, and you do need that outside perspective. And that's when I, found working with you is so valuable, and why I think the outside perspective and input and guidance is so critical. Um, when you're working with a team, are there things that you look for or that are signals to you that there may be a problem in that unified journey process?
For me, it's how people are communicating or not
Communication.
communicating.
Mhm.
So are we really getting to the last 10% of truth? Are we really being honest with each other, or are we just pacifying so we can get through the day?
Yeah.
If our meetings are boring, why? Is it because we're not challenging each other? Um, you know, are we on the other end of the spectrum? Too aggressive, too opinionated, too many strong personalities. And we're not really giving each other the space to think, create, innovate. So
Yeah.
I really look for the way that people are communicating and how they're relating to each other. I mean, we all have different personalities, and we all have emotions. Some of us show them, some of us don't. And like I said before, some of us operate on great set of core values and some of us don't. There's good people. I think there's more good people out there, trying to do good things, but sometimes we get either a bad egg that we have to navigate, or we just get people that don't fit.
That's the
And
next book you should write, Navigating the Bad Eggs.
yeah, exactly. Exactly. And it's like one of the things I've realized, in the last few years is that none of us are immune.
No.
Like we can try to prepare, but business is messy and it is personal, and especially if you're a business owner, and you're going to get hurt and business is going to break your heart. And I don't think that we talk about that enough, that
Yeah.
yeah, it's gonna hurt, and it's gonna take time for, I mean, we spend the majority of our hours, either with our team or working with clients, and so things are gonna happen. It's gonna be really hard, and
Yeah.
our character shows up at those crossroads.
Oh, it does. I think there's two things that have been on my mind a lot. I've just been when I talk to other business owners or people, in leadership positions, there's a lot of burnout right now. Coming through COVID, dealing with the disruption in the political
Mhm.
world and, just sort of the state of our country, and then, technology and AI, and there's so much disruption and speed feels like it's increasing, and I'm just seeing it everywhere. Everyone is like, I'm burned out. I need to slow down, but I can't, and I'm panicked. And what about tomorrow? And are you seeing that? And if so, how are you advising those people?
Yeah. Seeing it, feeling it myself, I mean, we're all in the same, world right now. And, burnout, it comes from pressure.
Mhm.
It's not about so much the hours you're working or anything like that, because you can be passionate. And I'm sure, like all the beautiful paintings, you could paint for hours and not feel burned out.
Correct.
And I think that with work, it's not the hours or the effort we're putting in, it's the pressure that we're putting on ourselves and the pressure that we feel. And so it's really figuring out, okay, what's the reality? What's the reality of the situation? What is it that we really need? Which direction are we headed in? And how do we close the gap between where we are and where we want to be? And I think that reality testing, it's really hard right now because we're all trying to filter through what's truth, what's not truth. What are we supposed to care about? What are we not supposed to care about? Are we helpless? And so every road ahead that we all look at, I always say there's just two ways we can go. We can go the way of fear, we could go the way of hope. And hope is a tricky word because sometimes people think like, oh, that's so head in the clouds, and that means that I'm not taking what's happening seriously. And I think no, it's really the counterbalance to fear. It's really there. Every fear sells, we're seeing that. And, you know, fear keeps you stuck at best. And at worst, it takes you backwards.
Yeah.
And it also, fear masquerades as logic. So we start to think things like, we have these fears, and oh, that's, of course, this is where I should stay, where it's safe, and all of this, because, our brain is logically processing through that fear, and its fear is always rooted in disbelief about something, you know. So how do we pivot that? Because hope is what's going to propel us. Hope is what's going to innovate. But hope is where vision lies. And so the simple example of AI is a good one. It's scary because it's unknown. And so we have a choice. Either we can fear it or we can figure it out. And we know that change is going to happen and not all the change is going to be easy. And there are going to be shifts in the landscape. But we also know that this has happened before. So I'm old enough to remember life before the internet.
Yeah.
And I worked in the business world before the internet, before having a laptop. And, the jobs that I did as a grunt and entry level job, like ripping contracts that I had to go to the printer room to get out and filing, like how much time do we spend filing? And
Oh,
so the
using
grunt,
whiteout.
yeah, using whiteout, like hours on this. And then technology happened and people are like, oh, we're going to have to get rid of so many jobs. But no, it's just that the jobs shifted. So I wasn't ripping contracts and filing and using whiteout. I was now on a computer. And I think the same thing is going to happen with AI where jobs are going to shift. The skills and the tasks are going to just change. And so the people that can get ahead of it are the ones that are going to come across more hopeful, more innovative, more creative. And the people that push back and are nervous and are the ones that are going to get stuck or, you know, feel like things are going backwards. And we need leaders that can balance reality, that understand the reality of the situation, and they can affirm people where they are and tell them, I know that what you're feeling is real, but what are we going to do to pivot and push forward?
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's such an exciting time. It does remind me of the beginning of the web and,
Mhm.
you just hearing about Photoshop for the first time,
Yeah.
um, and just being like, "You can do what?" Uh, and it just the whole reason I got propelled into it was because suddenly I felt like I was able to unlock things that had previously been really big barriers to what I could do in terms of, creating websites that where anyone could see my art anywhere in the world versus the old school way of, taking slides and putting them in slide carousels and sending them to try to get a residency or something, an exhibition.
Yeah.
So it was like that ability to connect with more people was suddenly unlocked, and then the ability to create in mediums
Mm.
that I previously had been restricted to, like, even in the user interfaces and the software that enabled me to do it without knowing how to write code, and, I feel like that's, a repeat today with AI, because it makes me think of there's so many different ways to try to solve problems now,
Mhm. Mhm.
and so many creative ways to start thinking about it, and it's so empowering to have all of these, like, well, what ifs in front of you,
Mhm.
um,
Mhm.
but I do know that's scary, and, eh, you know, it will be a huge change, and we don't know what that's gonna look like, but I think, it's, when I was talking to someone the other day, and I said, "Well, what if professional sports, said we've identified a performance enhancing drug that's completely safe, and it's legal. All athletes are now allowed to take this very significant performance enhancing drug. And you know that you're now going to get you're not going to make the team. You're not going to win the race if you're not taking this drug or taking advantage of this thing that is now accepted as, it's just like,
Mhm.
I don't know, there's something there where it's such a game changer, in terms of what it can empower us to do around problem solving, around creativity, um, around so many things that
Mhm.
I just think, yeah, I think if people are digging their heels in and are afraid of it completely, I think that's going to be a problem. Um, but is it going to be messy and is there going to be a ton of crap for a
Mhm.
long time? Yeah, you know, there is. That happened when the internet happened. There were a million
Exactly.
horrible websites. I mean, that's how I built a business. Uh, there still are millions of horrible ones, but, it's like it's not going to just solve all these problems. There's still going to be a lot of problems to solve, I think.
Yeah, there will be. And I think it's going to take smart leaders, courageous leaders to step up and figure out how is it best to navigate this? How can I
Mhm.
take a breath, rise above the weeds and figure out, what's best for me, what's best for the team? How can we get in a room and innovate in a way that points us in the right direction for the future? And I think, not getting burnt out in the weeds is going to be the key. Rising
Yeah.
above, you know?
Yeah. I think burnout, because of, I think AI burnout is going to be a thing in
Yeah.
particular because there is so much potential. There is
Mhm.
like, you can do so much so quickly on all these different platforms and they keep changing. And I'm like making a spreadsheet to manage my subscription so that I don't feel like, wait a minute, did I pay for that one?
I know. I
Am
know,
I
and it's
using
like
it?
everybody is inundated, and I have so many clients that are like, "Do you think I have ADHD? I think I have ADHD." And I was like, "Okay, everybody thinks they have ADHD, and it's
Yeah.
because we have so much coming at us. It's
Yeah.
insane. It's unprecedented. In
Yeah.
the human history, we've never had this much coming at us. So
No. And
how do
we have
we
not,
navigate
yeah,
it?
we
Yeah.
have not had time to evolve to meet the time, right? I
No.
mean, if you think about how evolution has worked and then how much has happened in, the little tiny slice of human evolution that we're experiencing right now, it is insane.
Yes.
Um, what do you recommend to people who are feeling that overload? I mean, is it like eh, take a vacation in the woods and, don't look at your phone? Like how do you navigate this particular scenario?
Yeah, I think that's in the simplest terms, yes, you have to disconnect
Mhm.
because and I'm so guilty of this that, I'll have a million tabs open, a million screens, a million different things, and then all my
Guilty.
emails, all the things, right? And then something starts to glitch, and I actually get mad at my computer, like, "Why is my Zoom not working? Why is it, like, a glitching?" "Oh, it's because you have 800 things open, and not even the poor computer can function, so why do I think I can?" And I have to, metaphorically, close all my tabs and completely shut down so I'm not glitching, as my teenagers will say, And I think that we just don't think in those simple terms. We're over indexing even on how we think we should find rest. And
Mhm.
I think that we have to think about all areas of rest. We have to think about physical rest where we do shut down, but we have to think about mental rest, spiritual rest, and we also have to think about what is actually driving us. Because it doesn't matter how many vacations you take. You will not feel rested unless you reset the why behind everything you're doing.
Mhm.
And when you have a healthy why, and like what I like to call a healthy ambition for what you're doing, then you can find real rest. But if you are trying to keep up with the Joneses, you're constantly comparing, you're constantly competing, you're constantly living in fear, you're constantly like unable to disconnect, then you're never going to feel rested. It doesn't matter if you fly to Bali for 2 weeks and come back. You're not going to find it until you go deep.
Okay, let's go deep on that if you don't mind.
Mhm.
So finding your why, right? So if you are a high performing um, business executive, business owner on a leadership team, you have a lot of responsibility. You've got your all your KPIs or whatever the heck you're trying to hit or your revenue
Mhm.
goals. You got people's salaries you're responsible for. You've got kids you're trying to make sure can, go to college. You've got maybe aging parent. You've got a lot of pressure, especially
Mhm.
for people in this like kind of sandwich place that a lot of us find ourselves in.
Mhm.
Um, why do you need to have a why for just like how you're trying to, keep the boat afloat and support, paying the bills, paying the team, keeping the clients happy? How do you go past that with clients?
Mhm. I think that what drives you will define you.
Mhm,
So if you don't figure out what's driving you, if you don't figure out what your why is, somebody else is gonna define it for you.
mhm,
If you don't design your life, somebody else is gonna design it for you. So I say take back the reins and really figure out, okay, what is it that I want? Separate and distinct of my business. If I'm a business owner, I know that I want my business to sustain me. I know that I want it to help people. But what is it that I want for my life and who am I? How am I uniquely gifted? You're named Tracy, I'm named Tracy. You're uniquely created, gifted and talented and different than me. So you're going to lead differently. You're going to look through a different lens. Your life experience, the way that you see the world is different than mine. So we can both be great leaders, but we're going to do it in different ways.
mhm.
And we'll be the best versions of ourselves when we understand who we are. And so I think for leaders, it's really what is your identity? Who are you? What's it like to be inside your head? And can you figure out and navigate that well so that you can be the best version of yourself? And then what's it like to be on the other side of you? So what are your relationships like? How are people receiving you? What does it feel like to be on the other side of Tracy? And then lastly, what are your results? What are your capabilities? Can you deliver on what you say? Are you somebody who can affect the bottom line, who is going to show up, who is going to use their talents for good? And so when I'm kind of working with leaders, I'm looking through that framework of like, let's understand what's unique about you and make sure you're putting that forward in a positive way. Because then you're going to have a balanced humility about yourself. You're not going to be driven because you want glory and recognition, but you're also not going to be driven because you want to be liked by everybody. You're going to be driven by the right things so that you can make an impact.
You talked about fear, and we've talked about sort of the level of craziness that we're all living through, but fear and how that shows up. I mean, I think a lot of people are driven by fear, um, or survival. I mean, anyone who's had to, most people who've had to go through life have had hard things happen, whether it was
Mhm.
when they were really little or more recently. But there that can eat away at your ability to trust in others and to trust in yourself and to kind of
Mhm.
always be in, what was that one book where, she talked about always being in the critter state. You're always,
Yeah.
like waiting for the next shoe to drop and you're kind of in that survival mode. Do you see that much as a particular problem? And is there anything that you would say is like a first step to moving around that or getting through that?
Yeah, I think it's naming what your fears are
Mhm.
and realizing and I've had to do this work myself, like, just wrestling through, like, hardships or crossroads of understanding that what I give energy to is gonna grow. So if I give energy to a certain fear or to a certain person or to a certain event or to a certain, feeling, it's gonna grow. If I give energy to something good, it's also going to grow. So I have to, hit pause and say, "Okay, what is it that is driving me to do the thing I'm doing?" Why do I feel like I have to do this or make this phone call or write this thing or have this conversation or take this meeting? Why am I is it for a good purpose or am I feeding a fear?
Yeah, that's fear is like a vampire, right?
Mhm.
It definitely it feeds off of us. And anyone who's dealt with betrayal of trust, which
Mhm.
we've experienced that, and
Yep.
a lot of people have, and you're just sort of rocked by certain things.
Mhm. Mhm.
Your identity, you can change careers, and how does your identity deal with that? And so there's just so many scary things that can
Mhm.
can really build up a lot of fear. I love that what you give energy to grows.
Yeah.
I used to think, I think I wrote an article called like "Good Things Grow," but now I think it's "Grow Good Things."
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's like, what are you tending to? And being mindful of that is it can have such a compounding effect.
Oh, yeah.
Um,
And I
I
think you and I have both experienced that trust is risky.
Yeah,
Like, when you put your trust in another person, a leader, coworker, relationship, whatever it is, it's risky. You're taking a risk. And when that trust is broken and if you're betrayed or, there's a lack of integrity on that person's side and y- it hurts. It's betrayal is so hard to get over.
yeah,
And it invites all sorts of fear and all sorts of vulnerability. And the most damaging thing it can do is keep you from trusting again.
yeah,
But when we don't trust as leaders, we just become managers.
yeah, yeah.
We're just pushing the things around and we're keeping everything at a distance. And that is really dangerous. So it's kind of like you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. But and so that's where it's like, okay, am I going to push through the fear and trust again? Am I going to push through the fear and heal and decide to give energy to the right things and be able to kind of let go of, what happened in the past? It's hard.
It is. It is. This is not a. It's not a. This is not a ride for the faint of heart.
No.
Um, I do often just stop and say, I didn't realize how much bravery was
Mm,
going to be required to
yeah.
kind of get through this all. But it is. You just have to. You have to decide how you're going to show up when those hard things happen, and also, I think, yeah, be conscious of what how you're allowing yourself to evolve,
Yeah.
um, based on the hard things that happen. We don't usually, I can't say like this great thing happened and I totally changed because of it.
Mm,
It's usually like this horrible thing happened and I totally changed because of it. And I've always been very purposeful in how I move through hard situations because I know they're great opportunities for growth.
yeah. Yeah.
It's like it might smell like shit, but it's just fertilizer.
Yeah.
Uh,
And it's fertilizer for our character.
yeah,
So it's like our life between birth and death is just a bunch of choices that we make.
I know.
And all of those choices add up to our character and who we are. And I think when I am at a difficult crossroads or I feel like, trust has been betrayed, I have to choose the high road. I have to choose my character. I have to choose, pushing through and trusting that all the choices I've made up to this point are going to get me through this.
Yeah.
And, when I'm coaching leaders, I always say, it takes a lifetime to build your reputation and about a moment to lose it.
Mhm.
And so when you hit these crossroads, you got to stop and you got to think, what is the choice that I'm going to make? And is it going to be fertilizer for my character or am I going to give into the fear and
Yeah.
try to like self-protect at all costs, you
Yeah.
know? And it's hard. You need trusted people around you. You need to be able to hit pause and give yourself that space and that's hard because we feel like we're being chased by the lion, right? And so, we're going to fight, flight, or freeze. And do we have the coping skills? Do we have, the emotional intelligence to be able to navigate it and navigate it the best that we can?
Yeah, and I think that's where, it makes rest
Mhm.
really hard, um, because if you do feel and again, I think a lot of people do, like, they are running hard because they gotta keep up, and they're trying to game plan what's this gonna happen in this market? What's next year look like? How is this person performing? What's gonna happen with this client? Like, there's so many what ifs,
Mhm.
and there literally is no way to, like, I stop myself all the time now and just say, this is just your mind. Your mind is just running
Mhm.
These thoughts are actually not real.
Yeah.
They're your primitive brain just creating noise, and it's all coming from threats that aren't real.
Yeah.
And it's
Mhm.
very hard to quiet it down.
Yeah. Well, nobody's gonna talk to you more than you.
Yeah.
You are your best friend. You're the number one voice in your head. And so the only person who can change the script inside your head is you. And I think when we realize that and we can say, sometimes this will happen to me even like when I'm getting ready in the morning and I'm like, brushing my teeth and I can feel the wheels turning and I'll think to myself, okay, I've got two choices here. Like I can turn on a podcast to drown it out, which is always an option. Um, or I can, stop and take a breath here and actually kind of like put pen to paper. Like what is it that I'm why am I thinking about this? What about this event, this person, this thing, this and catastrophizing or whatever it is that I'm doing?
Yeah.
And how can I solve for it? Is this something that I have to take action against? Is it something I can control? Is it something I can't control and I need to just put it in its proper place and move forward? Again, what am I giving energy to? And if I can solve for it, I need to solve for it. I need to
Yeah.
put on my big girl pants and solve for it. And if I can't, I need to learn how to navigate it. I have to
Mhm.
I had the only way, is to push through.
Yeah. Um, God, so many questions. How how have you seen how has there been something that has surprised you that a leader or a team was able to do in the way they went about it? Is there anything that you're like, "Oh my gosh, that I would have never seen that coming?"
You mean in a good way?
Yeah, well, if you yeah, just
Yeah.
say positive if you've got a
Yeah,
good one, but
yeah.
if all you've got is bad ones, then
Yeah.
that's fine.
No, no. I have lots of good ones. I think one of the great things about the work we do is that we get to come in as facilitators and connect the dots. And so when we're with a team, we can see how the team is operating and we can just kind of maybe toss out the right question, a
Mhm.
question that they might not ask if we weren't there or if they just had each other. We can notice who's speaking less. We're there to sort of read the room and redirect. And we're also there to make sure that last 10% of truth gets out on the table.
Yeah,
And so when we get teams to that right place and they're able to have the right questions asked and to hear each other in the right way, it is so rewarding and so fun. Like just, the breakthrough, the finding, the blue ocean, getting them to the place where they're being innovative and creative and having healthy discourse. Like there's nothing like getting through a session and being like, that was some good arguing. Like you just
yeah,
love it. Where
yeah,
they're debating and they're so happy with each other. They want to just like celebrate because they have debated and they have pushed each other and they have argued in a way that their relationships are still intact, but they have had breakthrough. And that is not easy, but man, when you get there and you feel it, that's when the company's going to propel itself.
yeah. I think there's just a lot of, I think there are a lot of people that are so busy and so overwhelmed that even carving out the time to focus on these types of things can seem like, I'm too busy.
Yeah, well, you're
Um,
too busy because you're not doing it.
yeah,
It's like, people will spend more time planning a vacation than they will planning for their company or planning for their life, and it's like if you are so overwhelmed and you are so in the weeds and your team is, that just screams that you need to go through a process where you can really get a plan on paper, really figure out what you're supposed to be focused on. Because if you aren't creating that flywheel, if you don't know just those few things that you need to be focused on to move the ball down the field, then everything's going to be a priority, which of course means that nothing is.
yeah,
And everybody's scattered to the wind instead of feeling focused and energized. And the whole goal is to work smarter, not harder. And
Right.
too often we just think, oh, if we just grind it out, we'll get there. If I just, and it's really getting clear is going to give you the win that you really need for your company and for your team to feel
Yeah.
cohesive.
Yeah.
Mm.
I was talking to some friends of mine that started their own studio that I worked with them at my last agency, and and I was so proud of them for making that leap and the bravery that's required to do that. And one of the badges of honor is the amount of things that they've said no to.
Yeah.
And I remember talking with them about that, and just encouraging that to be, not to come from a scarcity mindset,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
I think there are some people who've been raised in a scarcity mindset,
Yeah.
and it's really
Yeah.
hard to undo that and kind of come from that abundance mindset.
Mhm.
And I think that puts people into more of that place of fear, that place of being reactionary instead of
Mhm.
creative and proactive, and forward looking instead of forward fearing. Do you see that crop up as a
Yeah, I do, and I also think that sometimes if it's not fear, it can be a visionary founder issue too.
Mhm.
Where, you're chasing the squirrel, you have another idea, you decide something and you're like, "Okay," the team decides it, they go after it, everybody's feeling focused, and then all of a sudden, that super visionary founder, it comes in and is like, "What are we doing? No, I have a new idea." And
Yeah,
everybody's like, "Oh gosh, a new," so and then the team pivots, and so sometimes, these things happen just because we're working with like hyper creative people, and they wanna keep creating, and they feel like, this is what one of the most amazing things too about doing, like, assessments with teams and figuring out, like, even the working genius, like, who's on one end of the, like, visionary spectrum and who wants to sorta, like, grind it out on the, like, and wants to do the
yeah,
detailed work, and how those groups of people interact with each other, and when the people that are, like, pushing to get the ball over the final, into the end zone, then the visionary people are the ones who can mess that all up, you know? And so it's like, it's do we have the patience to see things through? You
mhm.
know? And are we able to live in that space of just working on those few things to get us where, like, to your point of, what can we say no to?
Mhm.
And what are the things we're gonna focus on? And are we willing and daring and courageous enough to stick to that, to
Yeah.
do.
Have you read 4,000 Weeks?
Mm-mm. No.
Uh, Great book. It's maybe traumatized me a little bit, though. So 4,000 weeks is the average human lifespan.
Oh, right. Oh
Um,
gosh.
and the book basically says, you only have so much time, so have prioritize, like, be ruthlessly, focused in
Yeah.
how and what you spend your time on, because like, don't have a list of 10 things, have a list of 3,
Yes.
because
And I'm
otherwise you
gonna
won't,
yeah, I think one thing I'd say yes and to that
Mhm.
is we are currently experiencing, like, hustle culture, and that's what we've been
Yeah,
experiencing. And a
yeah,
lot of that came from, and, you can remember this, sort of that, like, carpe diem, seize the day, you only live once, all
yeah,
of
work
the
hard, play hard,
work
yeah,
hard, and, you might only have 4,000 weeks and all of that.
yeah,
And it's valid, but what it's created is this sense of, I think, instead of a sense of clarity and simplicity, it's given us this panic.
yeah,
And it's really hard to live with purpose when you're panicked. And
and
so
also
I
the
like
and
people
al
to shift.
yeah, and you mentioned earlier how important hope is, right? And
Mhm.
while I think the book is actually hopeful when you get into it,
Right.
and his follow-up was, all about meditation, because I think he was probably
Ooh,
like, I
yeah.
freaked out a lot of people. I need to calm them all down now. But what's wrong with still having hope that maybe you're going to do something one day, versus saying, I need to just stop having hope for that because it's distracting me and keeping me from being present in the like three or
Mm.
four things. Like, is hope a distraction? I don't know, you know?
Well, I think it's kind of like saying, "Is vision a distraction?" No, it's
Yeah.
not. It's a destination, right?
Yeah.
So, we can still enjoy the car ride, but it's much more fulfilling if we know where we're going, and so enjoy the ride to get there, but know where you're going, because otherwise all roads lead to, it's like the Alice in the Wonderland, right? So I think that naming the destination, figuring out how you're going to get there, and then enjoying the ride. It sounds so simplistic, and I know it's difficult, but if you could figure that out, that's the home run, right? So I think, kind of flipping the whole, we could die any day sort of thing. I like to think about, look at some of the people, we're living longer, we're living healthier longer. This is going to be a lot due to AI and medical technology. They actuaries say that the baby that is going to live to be 200 may have already been born. So so there's a possibility that we have a lot of life, hopefully, left ahead of us, and then we see people that are still working, still leaning in, and they're a lot older than us, and what does that mean for you and I? It means another career, another option, and I think about Peter Drucker, who wrote the majority of his books after the age of 65.
Yeah.
So maybe there's other books, and there's lots more paintings, and there's other adventures ahead of us.
Yeah.
And that shouldn't distract us from the good work we're doing today. But, your question was about hope. And I think that when we see the road ahead of us as long instead of short, and we are able to rest in the life journey, we're able to say, the road is long. I have time. I'm going to stop and smell the roses. I'm going to
Yeah.
call a friend. I'm going to make a connection. I'm going to have a relationship. And I can still, achieve a few things along the way. And I think we have to remember that success isn't a list that we check off. Success is a feeling. It is a feeling. And if you feel successful, you've decided what success means to you, and you feel successful, you're successful.
Yeah.
And I have to decide the same for myself. What is enough? What is it that I really want and need? What does success mean to me? And then when I feel it, it's enough. I can
Yeah.
rest.
Yeah. And being in a constant state of fear and distraction and anxiety, it keeps a lot of people from ever even getting a glimpse at it.
Mhm.
I think, at least for me, success has a lot to do with my control over how I spend my time
Yeah.
and what I allow myself to explore and think about, and the connections I have with other people,
Mhm.
family, friends, coworkers, colleagues. And there's not enough time to you do have to be, I think, kind of selective
Yeah.
in how you use your time, but being able to carve out the time
Yeah.
for those things, and knowing those things mean a lot to me and define success for me, it's great. That's the flywheel, right? Where it's
Yeah.
like, I'm excited to get up every day because I know that I'm going to be doing things that make me feel good and are my part of my core values, and having aligned them with work, and the work that I do is great. I mean, not
Yeah.
everybody is in a position to say that. And when you're meeting with clients and teams, how often is it that there are some wrong people in the mix? I mean,
Mm.
leadership teams don't just there's no like formula where we all just show up and we've all been perfectly organized to be a great team. It's usually like, it could be like the intern that just stuck around forever suddenly,
Yeah.
they kind of form organically and in messy ways, especially in small companies. And all of a sudden you're sitting at a table trying to make big decisions, with people that aren't necessarily there for the exact specific reasons that they should be there for.
Yeah. And those are hard conversations, we've had to have that conversation with leaders where we say, you know Bob's not the best fit, as far as what we're seeing and
Yeah.
hearing and observing. Has that ever been brought up to you? "Oh, yeah, yeah, we know, we know, we know." And again, it's like you're gonna have a hard time keeping those A players if you have the one bad seed.
Mhm.
And so sometimes I think leaders just want permission. They want someone like a consultant like us to come in and give them permission.
Yeah.
And and I admire the people that wrestle with it, because I know it's because they have empathy and they just, it's hard for them, but good leaders make the hard decisions. I mean, good leaders aren't afraid of confrontation. Good leaders aren't afraid of solving the problem. And bad leaders tend to kick the can down the road, and everybody is watching. It's just like, they say kids are always watching their parents. Kids are always watching their parents. Our team is always watching us. They're watching. They're seeing how we're reacting. Are we doing it? Are we not doing it? Do we know? Do we not know? If not, why not? If we do know, why aren't we doing anything about it? They're always watching. And so that is the burden of leadership. And either you're going to carry the burden well or you're not. And so there are places for people. We have to hold our staff with an open palm and realize, sometimes they're a fit and it's great, and sometimes they're not. And sometimes there's seasons they're a fit, and sometimes there's seasons they're not. And I saw this at HGTV. I mean, I was there for almost 20 years, and I saw from zero revenue dollars to $1 billion. So you see every single level of the company. And there were these phases and these crossroads that we hit where you saw exits. Lots of people left, or people had to get laid off or let go because they just didn't fit that version of the company anymore. And I think that's what we have to be looking out for as leaders,
Yeah. And as people, right?
as people.
Um,
Mhm.
our relationships change as we change. And it's a silly myth, I think, that, you kind of like are going to grow and evolve in this exact same ways as a group of people, or there is some kind of way to control that. I also think that you're sometimes freeing people to pursue a much more rewarding path
Completely.
of their own versus keeping them there because they might feel obligated. So I love following the journeys of people that have been through, working with me and then have gone on to do other things. And, it's just like this is a stepping stone on the journey. I don't
Yeah.
expect you to like move into the house and like never leave.
Right, and that's why I think it's, like, always having those open lines of communication, and for people to be brave to have these conversations, it's
Mhm.
like, the worst are people that exit poorly, they're
Yeah.
like, they're just doing stuff they shouldn't, and they're yeah, I mean, it's like, why? Like, I have helped launch so many different careers because I want people to be successful and happy. It doesn't mean that they have to do it on my team or at my company, to your point, there is a place for everyone to shine, hopefully. It's their journey to find that place, and I don't wanna hold anyone back from that. So I think, that's part of holding your staff with an open palm. I mean, I remember having somebody on my staff at HGTV, and I could just tell he was struggling, and I finally just said, "What's happening? What's going on in your head? Like, I don't want you to be scared to talk to me about this." And he was like, "I just wanna be a teacher." I remember, like, and it was not at all what I was expecting to hear, but we arranged it so that, he could work, a little while longer and then pursue his degree, and then he went off and now he's a teacher, and it's like, all it took was me as a leader asking, I see there's a struggle. How can I help you?" And to be completely okay that it's not longevity with my team, it's going to be somewhere else. Let make it happen. That's part of the gift of leadership is to help people, even if it's not on your team, helping them realize their full potential, whatever that full potential might be.
What what do you like in your mind's eye? You know, you're on top of the building, you're screaming with a megaphone. It's the thing you just keep saying or thinking, and maybe nobody's asking for to hear it, or they don't hear it when you say it. Is there kind of a mantra that you want to make sure you share on this podcast, at least, that needs to be heard more?
Well, I think, the subtitle of my book, What If There's More, is Finding Significance Beyond Success.
Mhm.
And I feel like if everybody in the world could just figure out who they are and what this positive, significant impact they could make in other people's lives, we would be in a better state. I think too many people are chasing money, power, image, fame. Now, my daughters are constantly telling me, it's all the likes, the follows, the platform, like and that is a real struggle for their generation and even ours is like how many people are clicking on this or reading this or liking this? And can we let go of that pressure and understand and make sure that we're not being driven by, you know, accumulating wealth or followers or fame or power. Because when we go down that path, it's the slippery slope that's leading us to where we are in this world today of division because we're chasing after things that can never be fulfilled. There will always be somebody wealthier, more famous, more powerful. You're never going to win. It's a no win game. So play the game you can win. And the game you can win is know who you are and use those gifts and talents to have a positive impact on the world around you and pursue the best version of yourself. Be ambitious for the right mission. And you have to decide that. You have to decide what that is and hold true to it.
Wow, this is a good. If I had a mic, I would drop it for you. And for anyone listening, I mean, this is why you should call Tracy and hire her to work through these things. It's like you're a psychologist, coach, consultant, expert, business person, all rolled up into one, and an author. And I hope we have the chance to work together again. I mean, if I could talk to you every day, I would.
Aw,
Um,
me too.
So thank you so much for joining us. And
Thank you.
again, if you haven't read Tracy's book, please check it out. I'll add show notes to helloadeo.com's link for Escape Velocity and make sure that everybody finds out how to get in touch with you and find you following this. But thank you again, as
Thank
always.
you. Thank you.